Hello and welcome to Dialogue. Israel launched missile strikes against Iran over the weekend against some 20 military sites, including air defense systems and missiles manufacturing facilities. While the U.S., Great Britain and others have not condemned the attacks, many in the Middle East have voiced outrage, including Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Syria and Iraq. What's the impact of these attacks? What could be the Iranian response? And is this the end of Iran-Israel conflict or a prelude to more strikes? Join us for discussion today, live from Beijing. I'm Xu Qinduo. Joining me today are Jamal Abdi, President of the National Iranian American Council, Habib Battah, independent journalist and founder of Beirut Report, Shahar Azani, veteran Israeli diplomat, and Einar Tangen, senior fellow of Taihe Institute. Welcome to Dialogue. Well, as I understand, Mr. Azani is going to leave after 10 minutes to catch a flight. So I will start with you, Mr. Azani. So if you look at the strike from Israel, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said, Israel's airstrike on Iran over the weekend was, quote, precise and powerful and achieved all its goals. So tell us, what are Israel's goals to strike Iran here? Of course, as part of the retaliation, but anything beyond that?
I'm working on that right now.
Hello, Mr. Azani? Seems there's a tech glitch over there. So Tangen, do you think there's, of course, retaliation for the October 1st, basically beginning of October missile strike from Iranian side? The revolution is coming out. We don't have the full picture yet. But what do you make of these airstrikes?
Well, these airstrikes, I think from the U.S. side, and this was definitely coordinated between Israel and Washington, was basically to calm things down. They didn't hit the oil assets, they did not hit civilian areas, and they did not hit the nuclear areas. They hit some very specific bases where there had been, missile defenses against air cover attacks, and also they hit areas where they thought that ICBMs were being produced. So this was basically what I would call a de-escalation attack. They're trying to say, okay, we did what we needed to do, so it's over. But if I come over and slap you, I can't tell you now, don't hit me back. Mm-hmm. That's the issue here. Iran has indicated that they have many options. I think there will be some sort of retaliation, but the question is, will it be like the last time where they do something symbolic more than trying to escalate? And there is always concerns about Israel, whether they are trying to escalate this into a situation where they could draw the United States full military force into a war directly with Iran.
Okay, that's more about the U.S. Views on that. Mr. Azandi, so the Prime Minister Netanyahu said that Israel has achieved its goals. So tell us more on that. What are the goals?
Well, at the end of the day, when you look at this situation from Israel's perspective, it's very clear. Iran has been at war with the State of Israel for decades now, funneling and funding proxy organizations like Islamic Jihad, Hamas, Hezbollah in Lebanon, killing innocent civilians and truly immiserating millions of people all across the Middle East, using the Houthis in Yemen and other forces, all in an attempt to what they call export the revolution. Iran has also been in continuous war already with the United States of America, using the proxies and militias in Iraq and Syria. And let us also remember that Iran's attacks in the last few months against Israel included hundreds of ballistic missiles targeting civilian population in Israel. If it hadn't been for the air defense systems, many people might have gotten hurt as a result, and we would have seen what we call a significant escalation. So the intentions are absolutely there. And what Israel has done initially after the April attack was a pinpointed attack as a warning. Iran did not get the message and continued to tease Israel and funnel its support for the proxies. And later on, after the recent attack of October that included hundreds of ballistic missiles, Israel sent yet another stronger message, sending 140 fighter planes into Iran and again pinpointed military targets as opposed to the savage attack that came from the direction of Iran. It's clear that Israel is not interested in an all-out war, but there can no longer be any kind of attack on Israel with impunity, whether directly or through these proxies.
So the message is basically to warn Iran out of the war?
To let Iran know that there will be no more attacks with impunity, that Tehran will be punished directly if it attacks Israel. And remember, the situation up to now has been that the Iranians are very quick to trade other people's blood. They can use the Lebanese blood to fight against Israel from the north. They can use the Houthis' blood and the misery of the Yemenis to fight against Britain and the West and the United States. They can use Palestinian blood in Gaza to fight against Israel. But they have always been safe in Tehran, thinking that they can play this game from a distance without getting hurt themselves. For the first time, they've been hurt significantly.
We are now seeing it's like a regime, cycle, a vicious cycle of retaliation, yes. Strike, a counter-strike. Do you think there will be a response from the Iranian side?
Well, the term vicious cycle is inappropriate because what happened was a savage attack against the state of Israel that came on October 7th from Iran's proxy Hamas in the south, but it's all part of the same cycle that we've seen for the past 30 years. It was Iran that spent billions of dollars building a ring of fire around the state of Israel in order to attack the state of Israel. Now, this is a regime that's highly corrupt, unpopular, and most of all, beyond the war that it wages against Israel, the US, the free world, and the peoples of the Middle East, it's a regime that is at war against itself. It's fighting against its own youth, its own civilians, its own population. And instead of spending those billions of dollars on infrastructure and on doing good for the people of Iran, it's been executing youth, torturing them at the notorious Evin prison in Tehran, and spending all of this money instead of internally for war against Israel. So it's
Mr.
not a
Azani,
question of
you
Israel
mentioned
started,
Hamas,
Iran started. It's a cycle.
In response to
Yes.
October 7th, the Israeli goal had been, at least, let's say, for the destruction of Hamas and the return of the hostages. On the issue of returning hostages, your defense minister, Gallant, said that painful concessions is necessary. Not everything can be achieved through military means. How popular is it inside Israel?
Well, the Israelis view the return of the 101 innocent hostages as a major goal of the war. This war cannot be over without getting our hostages back. And remember, we're talking about a baby that was snatched from his bed at the age of 9 months, all the way to Shlomo Mansour, an 86-year-old man who was kidnapped from the safety of his home. So for Israelis, this is very significant, and Israelis are willing to make painful concessions, as we've seen, by the way, months ago with the former deals between Israel and barbaric Hamas. And we're willing to make concessions to get our citizens back because Israel failed on October 7th. We failed in defending those communities. These are not
Mr.
soldiers who fell in battle.
Before
These
you
were
leave,
innocent civilians.
Last question. If you look at the issue long term, now we can say Hamas, Hezbollah, they are crippled. Let's say they're probably not capable of launching any attack against Israel anymore. But the long term, don't you think these people would say this is not that proportionate response from Israel, either against Hamas, against the Palestinians, or against the Hezbollah? has created a lot of, say, hatred toward Israel or even Jewish people. Long term, the young generation, when they grew up, they would harbor this idea of anti-Israel or against Israel. Do you think Israel is getting safer because of this operation?
Let me tell you, in the past 18 years, the Palestinians had a de facto state in Gaza. Israel did not go into Gaza. Israel did not interrupt Gaza, even though we've seen their TV commercials. We've seen their Mickey Mouse children's show inciting hatred. We've seen the UNRWA schools. What was the result of those 18 years of quiet? 18 years where Israel stayed out. Continuous attacks from Hamas, and at the end of the day, on October 7th, butchering innocent Israeli civilians, raping teens, decapitating Israeli babies. So at the end of the day, the policy of staying away and letting sovereignty take place did not work for Israel. But I'll tell you what, I'm very hopeful and optimistic, because what's happening in Gaza gives Palestinians who do desire peace and justice the potential to rule their lives without dictatorial evil Hamas. What's happening in Lebanon gives Lebanese the chance to regain their sovereignty from the stranglehold of Hezbollah in Iran and maybe become an independent country again. And who knows, maybe down the line we'll see freedom on the streets of Tehran again from the Ayatollah Mullah regime, where the Persian people will be free to be their own selves rather than under the stranglehold of a revolution that has been immiserating them and hundreds of millions of people all across the Middle East and the world.
Thank you, Mr. Azani. Thank you for joining us. And so, Mr. Habib Battah, you were shaking your hand. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, if you listen to the Israeli guests, it would sound like Israel is pursuing world peace and offering a flower to everyone. This is completely an abandonment of the truth and the reality on the ground. Israel has been attacking multiple countries throughout this conflict. Israel has been engaged in a plausible genocide, according to the highest court in the world. Israel's leaders have been wanted for many war crimes. The savage destruction of Gaza is like no other conflict in history. So I would completely reject almost all of the statements made by your guest. The guest even is bringing up some false claims about decapitation of babies and rapes, which were never actually substantiated. And we have seen these kind of news stories that have been fabrications in the past. Namely in the U.S. Gulf War, where also allegations of killed babies were made. So these are all kinds of PR tactics that are well polished and have no grounding in reality. Right now the people of Gaza are starving. People in Lebanon are being ethnically cleansed. Entire villages are being erased from the map. The idea that this is some kind of self-defense is really not taken seriously by anyone. This is a complete propaganda speech that is being given over and over again. Unfortunately, much of the Western media accept at face value what Israel is saying without ever even actually checking the sources. Israel is actually facing a lot of defeats on the battlefield today. Israel's attack against Iran did in no way overwhelm Iran's air defenses. Any military expert knows that in order to strike serious military targets, when you have a real country with a real defense system, it would need to overwhelm that system with a huge number of missiles in order to penetrate any targets. I would treat everything that the Israeli government says as a government at war, using the media as a propaganda tool to exaggerate completely its positions, again, with never offering any evidence of its completely ridiculous claims.
Well, and Mr. Battah mentioned that Israel would say they has a right to defend, self-defense. And if you look at the Western leaders, for example, British Prime Minister Starmer did say that not long ago, that Israel has a right to defend itself, even after the strike launched by Israel against Iran. What do you make of that?
Every nation, every people has the right to defend itself. The fact is that Israel has been adjudged to be engaged in genocide, apartheid, and it is now invading other countries. In order to get to Iran, it had to illegally fly over Iraq. Iraq has launched a formal complaint to the UN. They overwhelmed Lebanon's missile defense apparatus, and then they went in. But this issue that you're either for Iran or Israel or for Hamas is deceptive. We have a lot of bad actors out there, but that doesn't mean that Israel can be even worse. You have 144,000 Palestinians who have been killed or injured. And now you have even more going forward in Lebanon. Those are not acceptable. That is not the right to defend yourself, is to kill innocent women and children. That is the mark of a monster, the same kind of monsters you say you're fighting.
Well, Mr. Abdi, Jamal Abdi, let's go back a little bit about Israeli strikes against Iran targets, like about 20 military sites. How much do we know about the damage here?
We know a little bit just based on the satellite images that have come out. But any sort of detailed understanding, I think, still has not been decided. And it appears that some damage was done. Iran reported that it had intercepted many of the attacks, but it looks like there was damage done both to Iran's air defenses as well as to some of its facilities involved in missile production. And it's still a debate how extensive that damage was. Some are saying more on the Israeli side that this has significantly set back Iran's ability to produce missiles. Which missiles, whether that is the long range or short and medium range, we don't know. They also claim to have taken out all of Iran's most significant air defenses, and that also we don't know. So if what the Israelis are saying is true, it would mean that the possibility of an Iranian response along the lines of its previous two retaliations against Israel that involved hundreds of missiles, that Iran would not have the capability to do that without significantly depleting its stock. They also, if what they're saying is true, it would mean that the Israelis could come in and preempt an attack with limited resistance if there are not these air defenses. I think, though, based on the Iranian response, it's unlikely that the extent of damage was as significant as some on the Israeli side are saying, because the response has been pretty measured. The supreme leader has delegated the decision on whether to respond, at least publicly, and has, kind of across the board, there's been sort of a playing down of any significance. So I think it's probably somewhere in the middle, but definitively, just like with Iran's strikes on Israel, we do not know fully what the damage was and what that means as far as Iran's capabilities.
Mm-hmm. Well, the supreme leader did say that Israeli strike should neither be downplayed nor exaggerated. What does he mean when he said that? Is he talking about? Of course, he talked about the any response from Iranian side should be in the line of the national interests. What's your interpretation of that remark?
To me, that remark is very in keeping with the Supreme Leader's sort of constant modus operandi to maintain flexibility. And so by both playing down the attacks but saying they shouldn't be completely ignored, I think he is leaving the door open to some sort of a response. But clearly, there is not this overwhelming mandate that they feel they have for some massive response. So I think it's almost a placeholder as the Iranians take stock of what happened and what a response may mean strategically. I also think it's important to note that on the Iranian side there is sort of a constant return to talking about the need to end the war in Gaza and Lebanon, and so I think the most important message here is that a political solution to the current carnage does exist. And many of the parties are ready and willing and eager for there to be a ceasefire to end this vicious cycle. God forbid we use that term, but to end this vicious cycle of violence that is only going to expand. And so on the Iranian side, many figures there have once again talked about this need for a political solution and a willingness to stand down if there is this ceasefire. But it is the Israeli side that continually has rejected the notion of a political solution and instead has sought to sort of up the ante militarily and continue the vicious cycle of fighting.
Mr. Habib Battah, Israelis, they moved from Hamas to, say, Lebanon. And there's a saying that the goal is to really creating this chaos. Already 2,500 people were killed, and 1.2 million Lebanese were displaced. This kind of chaos. So you do see also at the same time the fleeing of residents in southern Lebanon. Most of them are Shiites to Syria, let's say. So they say the purpose is to justify their possible long-term occupation of southern Lebanon. Does that hold water?
I mean, if we look back to history, Israel has continually invaded South Lebanon in the 70s, in the 80s, in 2006, and now again. So at times, Israel has held South Lebanon for almost 20 years. A brutal occupation that they enforced through a proxy militia, the South Lebanon Army, which was accused of many war crimes and torturing people of South Lebanon, running a torture prison that I actually had the chance to visit myself and listen to the stories of prisoners. And all of that was, that changed when Hezbollah had a long battle with Israel and actually forced them to leave South Lebanon in the year 2000. So it's entirely likely that Israel will continue to repeat its tactics, its brutal tactics, and try to occupy South Lebanon. This idea of self-defense, I think it should be noted, is never asked of the Palestinians and the Lebanese. What right do the Palestinians and Lebanese have for self-defense? When you're living under international law, actually, the people who are occupied and being attacked have a right to self-defense. And so I think that's what's missing from this conversation oftentimes is a view that opposes the Israeli view because the media is so dominated by listening to Israeli officials and all of their vast claims. I'd like to also make one more clarification from the previous guest, is that Iran did actually strike military targets in Israel, unlike what has been said. And Hezbollah has been actually successful at targeting military targets in Israel. And this is actually a stark contrast to Israel's approach, which has been a complete razing of the earth. We've seen almost 80% of parts of Gaza are uninhabitable. Entire villages will not be able to live. So Israel has actually targeted entire civilian infrastructure, claiming that there is some kind of military infrastructure hidden beneath it, but never offering any really significant evidence to back up that claim. So it does seem that Israel's goal here has been to really exact a very punishing civilian toll. And also Israel is pursuing a sectarian war in Lebanon. It is targeting largely people from one religious sect, the Shiites of Lebanon. As you mentioned, 1.5 million people have become homeless, most of them Shia. Almost all the villages and towns that have been struck in Lebanon, the vast majority have been Shia. So what happens in a country that has a sectarian power-sharing system like Lebanon is that it becomes clear to the other sects that one sect is being targeted, and that even when Shia, refugees from South Lebanon went to Christian villages, they were targeted there too, which creates this idea that the Shia population is very dangerous and must be avoided, and this causes a lot of deep tensions in Lebanon. And Israel's approach to Iran, by the way, was very different than its approach to Lebanon and Gaza, right? Israel didn't really do any real significant damage, as far as we can tell, to Iran, whereas its approach to Lebanon has been a completely unhinged, killing spree and destruction of land and civilian infrastructure. So, I think we need to also consider that in our analysis.
Yeah, Mr. Battah, you mentioned about Hezbollah's response or firing missiles against Israel quite successfully. But of course, the understanding from the Israeli side that basically Hamas or Hezbollah now they are not capable of launching attacks anymore. How true, how untrue is that all?
Well, that's completely untrue because we've just seen in the last 24 hours, I think something like almost 100 Israeli soldiers have been wounded. Israel has not been able to make any advances into South Lebanon. Every time they have come in, they have been fiercely attacked. a number of Israeli soldiers have been killed and seriously injured just in the last 24 hours. So I think, again, Israel's claims do not really match reality. Unfortunately, a lot of analysts and media have just gravitated to accepting whatever is claimed by the Israeli military at this point.
Well, of course, the U.S. side is reportedly already asked the Israelis not to target Iranian, say, nuclear or leadership, the government, or the, say, energy facilities. I mean, it seems like they did follow.
Yeah, they did, but this had to be coordinated. In order to get those pinpoint locations, I don't think Israel has the intelligence apparatus to do that, so obviously they needed some help in order to know exactly where to hit. So yes, this is why I call it a de-escalation strike. This was aimed at somehow having the last word in an argument. Whether it's the last word, we don't know. The one thing we do know is that the first casualty of any conflict is the truth. So you've heard from both sides. I, in fact, did say that every a group of people has the right to defend itself, and insisting that only one does is false. So this idea that it's all on one side or another, I think there are a lot of voices out there, Al Jazeera, many, who are taking up the cause. Yeah, American media outlets and a lot of European ones are defending it. But the fact is the world is outraged, and you can see that at the votes at the UN. What's going on ICC.
General Assembly, for example.
Let's go back to something you said earlier. It's time to stop the tit for tat. The only people who get punished here are the civilians. I mean, women and children. This is unexcusable. This is what I found very odd about the Israeli representative. He was acting as if they're doing a favor by killing these people. That somehow freedom is coming out of this is just completely obnoxious. And the truth is that Iran has been involved in backing different groups that have been attacking Israel. So there are no good actors here. The question is, when can we stop the killing?
Yeah, let me have this question from Mr. Jamal Abdi. We know the U.S. general election is very soon, less than 2 weeks. But how will that impact this development in the Middle East? Earlier you mentioned about, most sides are seeking a political solution. In particular, what's the impact on that effort?
The elections, I think, have really frozen the U.S. response in place, and if there is any remaining leadership role for the United States to play in ending this conflict, seeking a political solution, the hopes and dreams are that after Election Day, the Biden administration will have a freer hand to take a tougher stand with Israel and to actually use U.S. leverage to try to press for a peaceful solution that the Biden administration supposedly has wanted, and which the vice president who's running for president has said they're working tirelessly for. But it's pretty clear that the Biden administration has given Israel not just a pass, but cover, and enabled the war to continue. And a lot of that, may be some of the reading of the politics, and that the Biden administration does not want a political conflict with Israel heading into a general election. They have calculated that doing so could undermine support for the Democratic nominee. I think they also very much did not want Israel to take massive strikes on Iran. I mean, one that would potentially, impact energy markets and drive up the price of gas and things like that, have economic repercussions that could be very bad for the election, and or something large that would lead to, an all-out direct confrontation where Iran is potentially
we have to stop there.
U.S. forces. So,
Ms. Abdi, with just 2 weeks until the U.S. presidential election. And that's all we have for today. And many thanks to our guests. You can also find us on the CGTN app on YouTube. I'm Xu Qinduo. Thanks for being with us. See you next time.